Welcome back, everybody. How's it so far? Okay, how's it so far? Well, we're another fabulous couple of sessions and speakers for you. And again, some networking upstairs where you've just been, and a little bit of lunch. And Ian's just asked me to say in the networking session, he's here and the interpreters are here till 2, so if there's any point in getting anyone in support in that session for lunch, then just stick around and let me know. So I'd like to welcome Sally Pritchard onto the stage. Sally is the Community Learning Coordinator at Glasgow Science Centre. And I think one of the interesting things about the panel this morning for me is the first steps, what steps, they're very practical steps. It's not rocket science, and I hope coming from the Science Centre we'll hear about some rocket science. Thanks, Sally.
Hello, and thanks for having me, Julie. Thanks for asking me as well. As Julie said, I am the Community Learning Coordinator at Glasgow Science Centre. Just a wee bit of background, I've been in post about 5.5 years, and I'm funded by the Scottish Government to actually work with people that have accessibility issues, perhaps live in areas that are multiple deprivation. So really, I'm funded to work with groups who really don't usually access the Science Centre. So that is primarily my role, but leading or feeding into everything else that I do is other aspects, which includes basically accessibility, inclusion and participation. So really what I'm going to do is just give you a wee snapshot of what we do at Glasgow Science Centre. And just to say as well, this is the start of the journey. We've sort of been doing it for over a year now, using BSL interpreters, note takers and running clubs as well. But we're very aware that we've got a lot of work to do. So even this morning hearing everybody's story as well has really spurred me on. So, a couple of slides. Thank you. So, Glasgow Science Centre, we're open to everyone. What we want to do is basically make sure everybody has the opportunity to visit Glasgow Science Centre. And we are a charity, so we do have a ticket cost as well, which can be obviously a barrier in itself. So we do have other memberships. So if you're in a community group, you can come for £4 if you're in a group of 10 people. So there's other things that we do as well, but just sort of focusing on the BSL aspect. As I said at the start of our journey, but some of the things that we are doing at the moment is live science shows. So we do live science shows. They are sort of ad hoc though, when there's a demand for them to do them. So I think the biggest thing for me learning today as well is we need to be doing it every month. We need to have it at a time that's suitable for everyone to come, so that people can come with their families and enjoy. As Derek said, he's sort of missing out on opportunities, whereas his family can come as well. So we need to be getting that information out there a lot more too, that we do these things. One of the exciting things that we did do last year, well it's taken a couple of years actually, is we developed an app in-house. So it was the first for our creative team to actually develop it, speak to deaf professionals as well, the British Deaf Association, other people in the deaf community, and find out what would help in a sort of their experience at the Science Centre. So we chose 15 exhibits, and it was a pilot. It does seem quite small, but it took a long time to get there, and with the help of ITV signpost as well, we do have that, so we can come in, you can download the app, and you can actually go up to the floor 2, and you can be the BSL. And it's a starting point, and we really want to sort of expand it throughout the whole centre, and that is really something that we're working towards. So that is some young people trying out the app for us, and one of the biggest things, the feedback was our Wi-Fi wasn't good enough. enough. And we're in the Science Centre. So we're like, this is so embarrassing. So we're like, right, okay, so everybody came back and said, this is rubbish. And it was so embarrassing. So immediately we're like, technology, we should be at the forefront of this. So that was something that we really focused on. And now when you download the app, it's actually quite efficient as well. So as I said, we just need to expand this out everywhere. Planetarium shows. So there are quite a few concerns about doing shows in the planetarium. Initially we had a red light, and there's the interpreter, and then we had a plasma screen and a note taker. And it did work to an extent. And I think the biggest learning curve was when the presenters were actually talking about the sky and then pointing. There's that sort of gap in between, so you need to understand and leave a bit of space. So there was a bit of staff training development there. But I think we're still at the stage where having a red light at the side is not good enough. So even though we've been doing it, we're really aware that, again, technology, there are things moving forward. And it all comes down to a lot of time, money, budgeting. But for me, it's like the priority. It's like, if we're going to do it, we should be doing it properly. And if we're going to do it right, then we're in the Science Centre, we're actually helping a lot of other people develop their programmes. So we need to be at the front of that. Partnership working, though. We have had the pleasure of working with Dr. Audrey Cameron. And last year we did a pilot Deaf Science Club. So that was really successful. Not in numbers, but in everything that we learned about how to greet somebody at the front door, how to make sure somebody knows directions. The building's massive, so how do you make anyone feel comfortable when you're coming in? You're like, you can't be lost as a general visitor anyway, so we do now have a welcome screen, we do have the subtitles as well, giving a bit of information about the Science Centre, so hopefully when you initially come in and you are deaf, you might feel a wee bit more at ease. But partnership working with Dr. Cameron led to the Deaf Science Club. And that was our first people that did it last year. So we're actually really happy to say we're doing another one. And it will start on the 8th of September. So that'll be another 8 sessions. And they'll all be run by Dr. Cameron, who's deaf, and interpreted, and Ben Electronic in particular as well. So that is our next adventure. And I'm sure we're going to learn lots from that as well. And obviously the quote from a scientist. I'm not feared, I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work. And that's really sort of how we see it. It's not a failure when we're trying things out, we're just trying to make it better, develop. And also I think the biggest impact at the Science Centre of even having BSL as a language, as a sort of communication tool is the staff want to learn. People want to know more. There's not a fear factor anymore, I would say. They're more like, how can I work out how to communicate? How can I make this better? I mean, why don't we have people that are deaf working at the Science Centre? You know, we need to see and look into the future and think, well, what's that going to look like? And I think the national plan for me gives me evidence and support when I go to the board of directors or people as decision makers and say, listen, it's written down here, so I know I've been banging on about it for a few years. But we have to do something about it. It's really important, and we need to be inclusive and accessible for all. So just to say thanks very much for listening, and I hope that you'll come to the Science Centre and see improvements, and that there's a better dialogue with us all. Thank you.
Question? No. That's great.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, absolutely. We're going free form today.
I'm really pleased with what you said about the silent shows and things like that. And yeah, it kind of hit me, it's fantastic the work that you've been doing. And it's nice to finally meet you as well, because I've kind of heard about you, the work that's been happening. Because we have 10 people that recently graduated from the RCS and things like that. So if there's events and things like that, you can get in touch with us and me and my colleagues. We would love to, especially my colleague that's here, we would love to work with you and stuff like that, yeah, to do specialist events and things like that. And you know, we can acquire a job and work with you in a professional way.
Love, shameless plug.
writer. And I think it's interesting when we heard from Andy this morning, it's like, and also from our colleagues at the Conservatoire, there's two ends of this telescope, the artist and the audience, the public, and I think it'd be really interesting to hear from EJ and Andy about your perspective. Over to you guys.
Hello, my name is EJ Raymond. This is my sign name. I've recently graduated from the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland, and I also have a company called Tertulia. I'm a deaf actor and I'm also a writer as well. So that's me.
And to introduce myself and remind myself that I've gone too far. Boom! My name is Amy Keskin. My sign name is Amy. I'm a graduate of a BSc in Deaf Studies at the University of Bristol. I've got a first class honours, and the only reason that's important is I got a 3% higher mark as a first class than my ex-husband. So not better. 6% average. Thank you very much. I'm also a registered, fully qualified interpreter.
Yeah, I've wanted to become an actress since I was a young girl, but faced a lot of barriers and also attitudes saying that I couldn't do that. And I was like, right, okay. But this passion kept in the back of my mind and eventually pushed to the forefront of my mind. And then I started at Ayr College. I won't say what year because it was spotted. And I was the only deaf person. They were all hearing. I was the only deaf person in the class, but I was resilient and I learned. When I finished a little mini graduation in 2001, and I was 21 back then. And then afterwards, I went to become a professional actress and I worked with Birds of Paradise, which was great. And then got work every now and then. And I got into an organisation called Grey Eye. So I was working for them, I was thinking, should I do this course at the RCS as well? Because it was a new course. And you can learn things like visual theatre, like with Ramesh, and there's more in-depth areas that I could learn, things like script to screen, and also devising, and also register and text. So these are the things that I could learn, new areas for me. So it's a good learning curve for me as well. That's me so far, and I'm carrying on with Tertulia and over to Amy.
So I'm going to start with a pink gorilla. And the reason I start with a pink gorilla is I was 6 years old and my best friend had a deaf mum, and I used to think her mum was the grumpiest person in the world. She was always shouting and I just thought all deaf people are scary, I'm not interested. And this one day I went round to their house and there was a different atmosphere. It was like walking into a film and suddenly there's this glow, this warm glow. And I was like, what's going on? I was like, oh, my mum and a deaf friend. I'm like, there's more of them. It's not a one-off. And so I popped my head around the door, and this guy called Stephen Snow kind of grabbed my attention and went straight into a pink gorilla story. Now, I would recommend looking at YouTube. There are hundreds of pink gorilla stories. It's American Sign Language, deaf law, oral literature, and it's a great story about a man and a pink gorilla. I'll leave that with you to have a look at. But yeah, so that's kind of how my kind of journey into sign language started. I was hooked from storytelling from the beginning. It wasn't ABCs, it wasn't hi, how are you? It was straight into visual performance. Since then, obviously, I have my degree in deaf studies, and I am incredibly fortunate and lucky to have had tutors who are deaf greats, and I can say names to you that probably will mean hardly anything to most of you in this room. But for those of you that it does mean something to, Clive Mason, Lorna Alsop, Clark Denmark, and Linda Day, they were my BSL teachers. They are like the deaf royalty of IT, they're amazing. Linguistically, Rachel Sutton Spence, Kirsty Cormier having poetry told to me by Paul Smith, Francis Elton. I grew up just with a wealth of visual performance-related sign language, which has made me who I am today. I never got into BSL to become an interpreter. If you had met me right up until the point I joined an interpreting course, which was long after my degree, I would have gone, I'm not becoming an interpreter. What I'm interested in is language, culture, identity. Which kind of brings us on to this little thing, sign language, literature and performance. And this is something that I'm so passionate about, but makes me so sad. Because when I have a conversation with EJ and I go, do you know this, and this, she doesn't know. You know, for every great leap forward we are making, we're still looking for BSL performers as translators, interpreters, looking at English script first. But for me, the joy of language came from BSL. For me, when you perform BSL, you feel it, you have to go there. The art is the language. And when an audience sees it, it's visceral. It's visceral. I can't say the word, it's visceral. It's something tangible. It feels like a scene has been created that you can step into. And I feel like people are really missing a trick if all you're doing is translating. Now, BSL people don't think much of their storytelling because it's part of their language. They do it in deaf clubs, you know, when they get together. Every time they tell a story, it's high energy, high octane, aesthetically just gorgeous. And that's just part of their language. To emphasize this, I'm just going to show you a poem that I would have loved to show the actual guy doing it, but copyright. But his name is Peter Cook, and you should check him out. And he creates sign language poetry and has provided an English translation. So I'm going to read that first so it can come up on the screen, on the class screen with our lovely electronic note takers. Don't worry, there's no big fancy words. And then I'll show you what it looks like in sign language as poetry, not as an English translation, because this existed in sign language first. So it's called poetry. Poetry, poetry. Poetry is the shot, orbiting, circling, revolving, exploding. It's the open window, it's caught, smoking, it's the flame. It tastes delicious. It's loaded into the magnum and it's shot right back into your heart. It's poetry. Okay.
And I'm now going to talk about interpretive performances. This is me working in Scavengers. This is the favourite play that I've done to date, to be honest. And when we're discussing the play, there's two characters that have some spoken dialogue, and the director, which is Mark, is here today. We had some discussions about should it be interpreted, you know, because obviously we want to make sure the audience can access it, things like that. So do we need interpreting because all the performers are deaf? And they asked, should it be translated or how would it work? And it was a challenge. We decided to deal with it within the performance team itself. And you know, it's an issue in regards to working out and reading body languages, getting the cues right, reading people's facial expressions and the emotions and the mood to get things done and to translate it into the visual outspoken form at the same time. And it was more of a performative approach as opposed to being a formal interpreter. So it was kind of integrating the language within that. you know, and it's kind of given the audience that additional information. It was something that really hit home. It was a challenge, but it was a real good experience. And also thinking about the language so they're delivered at the same time and things like that, and using cues. And yes, so doing summaries of what's been spoken. And yeah, and obviously, you know, not panicking and things like that, being a bit like, oh God, we're going to get all sorted. And it was a massive challenge. And I was working for Grey Eye Theatre Company. And someone asked me about including, you know, interpreting for a show called The House of Bernard and Alba. And that's my style I used for that. And they asked me to do that, so when I arrived, and I was like, right, okay, I'm going to go to work with Grey Eye for this piece, put my course on hold for a while. And we're looking at certain words, like for example the word mad. You know, and kind of thinking about all the characters that are, you know, contained within this, things like that. I need to translate everything. You know, I need to learn the entire script, you know, all of it. And I was like, okay, it's nerve-wracking and disconcerting, you know, and I'm a deaf person here, I'm the only deaf person here, so it'll be a massive challenge for me. You know, guys need to know that I'm here all the time trying to keep up with everything that's going on. And there were certain things that were cut during the rehearsal process and things like that. And then obviously we made sure the characters kind of need to match the intent of the sign language, so it matches the spoken word and things like that. And do lots of modulating, whether someone's talking formally or, you know, those kind of things. So it's kind of making sure that I match the characters specifically. It was a massive challenge. There were subtitles as well. There was an interpreter as well to support me through this process. It was a huge creative challenge, but I really, really enjoyed it. And it kind of made me feel, you know, deaf audience when they come in, the feedback from them was great. You know, it was kind of good to see there's that more connection as opposed to just having an interpreter on the side of the stage. You know, so there's less of a disconnect. And, you know, and they may not have come, so people come from far afield to come and see the show, and they really enjoyed it. I got lots of positive feedback. People felt that they could connect. There's a deaf person on the stage, so I can connect as a deaf person myself. I could see everything translated, I could read your facial expressions, and, you know, hopefully we're going to do similar work like that in the future. That would be fantastic. And back to you, Annie.
Can I just ask, EJ, when you're thinking about, like, I'm going to guess, I'm going to say a name, Jenny at Graham, she was a deaf director. Do you think it's because of her experience and her background that she could pick up that your style of signing, your style of translation matched the main character, and that's why she said actually focus on that role and almost become like a shadow to that character? Do you think that's a fair comment?
Yes. Do you want to add more or not? No, but yes. After you. No, carry on.
So for me, obviously I'm not a deaf performer, and I'm going to drop my hands now, it'll be good. But I've got a couple of experiences working on stage, and for me things that are important, I like to talk about the time I did Tribes, finding a visual image for the Jungle Book. It's quite interesting. I don't know if you're familiar with Tribes, but essentially there's two brothers, and one of them kisses the other's girlfriend, and it's a real like pregnant pause, and the director of this particular show intercut it with the Jungle Book, I Want to Be Like You. And I realised that if I translated the song directly, the deaf audience would get that same funny beat. And so I realised I had to become King Louie whilst translating the song, but kind of embody those two things so that visually a deaf audience will get an exact same joke at the same time as the hearing audience. One of the highlights of my career was Purposeless Movements with Birds of Paradise, which was fully integrated. I got my thumb sucked by one of the actors. I'm still traumatised. I was carried across stage as a broken doll while one of the actors crawled. I was on their back. But for me, the reason that show was successful was the post-show discussion, where the deaf audience, I was crying and interpreting the post-show discussion because the deaf audience started talking about the performance as opposed to the interpreter. And I've interpreted a lot of post-show discussions, and it's always, what's wrong with the interpreter, what's the lighting, what they're wearing, were they good, were they bad, bring the other one back, that was no good. And nobody mentioned me once, which for me was amazing. And they talked about the fact that they'd seen the show. things like Spring Awakening, where we work with a male and a female interpreter, and sometimes just really be careful what you interpret. So for us early on, when we got the script, we realised there's a scene where the girl, it's like a teenage angst, if you're not aware of what Spring Awakening is. It's a big musical about teenage angst and identity and coming to know yourself. But there's a part of it where the group of girls talk about being abused by their fathers. And if you can imagine being a deaf youth girl watching a male interpreter talking about being abused, that would hurt in the same way as, so we flipped it, so I did that, and then my co-worker who's here, when the boys were in the boy group talking about their masturbation and fantasies, I'm like, as a young male that's deaf, I wouldn't particularly like to watch a female interpreter sign that. That might make me feel more embarrassed, whereas if I've got a male interpreter signing that, I feel more in that group the same way as it was staged by the performers with the obviously gender-specific roles. The other things I learned recently in terms of, I did quite a bit of sort of Atlatron with Blood of the Young Theatre Company, and I was amazed because the cast were just great. I would give them signs. There were these big visual moments where I was like, can I just give you a few signs, because that's what you're doing on stage is where the actual information is, and if they're looking over at me, they won't see it. And one of the things I really appreciated in that was the director, Paul Brotherton. He actually allowed the entire end of the show to end with all the cast signing. Like every single member of the cast was signing at the end of the show, at that big button at the end. He let that be signed, and I just thought that was incredible. And the other thing to mention that I want to say is just looking at people trying to find opportunities. So again, working with, I was approached by an artist who had got funding to create an accessible performance, and so they approached me and we started to develop it together, and then they're like, I actually want this to be an open door. I've got this space at the Tron, so Tron are amazing actually for offering space to emerging artists, and they said, we've got a platform, I've got time, it costs me nothing, can we bring anybody else in? And that's where we brought in Pepe and Adriana, and they came and did a visual performance. And that's an artist looking at the funding they've received, and actually, we booked this stage anyway, I've got the tech anyway, I've got the lights, who else can I open this platform to? I've got an interpreter on board that I'm paying, therefore all the behind the scenes things that Petra needed interpreting, technically, you've already got an interpreter. And it was just about looking at that and making it as big as it possibly could be. And that's means where it is just so beautiful when people start just really thinking about things. Just so we can move on to kind of the next slide, because you're bored of looking at this one, I'm sure. Just sometimes when we talk about interpreting, I think it's dangerous, and we should look at the word translation when it comes to performance. And just to have it as a thought in your mind, if you were going to translate a book or have a script translated, would you expect a 2-week turnaround? We're going to talk about tips, because that's why you're all here. We could waffle on, but we want to give you some tips. What do you do?
Yeah, tips for theatre really is to make sure the play matches the interpreter. For example, if it's a comic play, don't have a very serious person, someone that can actually interpret and has that comedic skills and identity and ability. You know, if it's storytelling, make sure the interpreter can actually match the style of the play as well. Sometimes you may need 2 interpreters, they may need to co-work, but make sure they both have the same skill set and ability to match the performance, so things don't get downgraded, whether it be comedic or maybe storytelling elements. So make sure you've got adequately suitable professionals in that respect.
I mean, one thing I would say is, it's probably the first thing I ever say to anybody who approaches me and asks me, will I interpret something? I say, could it be a deaf performer? If you thought early enough, could it be a deaf performer? Do you need me? I think that's a huge question. I kind of think about that under using the right person for the job. And I also think that whether you're using a deaf performer or an interpreter in the space, you need to think about, when using a deaf performer, have you got the right interpreter for them in the room? So that's making sure that they have the skill to talk at a level in English that matches the skill of the BSL user. That's making sure they know their boundaries. Sometimes I told you my sign name was this, but sometimes I get teased that my sign name is this, which means boundaries, because I'm well known for if I walk into a space, like for example with EJ in a rehearsal room, I'll go, hi, and nothing more, because I need her to trust when I'm in that space that I'm going to be whoever else's voice and her voice in the space and not my own opinion. So making sure that people know what their boundaries are. Now, usually when I see EJ more like this, but just it's knowing your boundaries. In terms of using a deaf performer or an interpreter, checking their skill level. Have you seen them interpret before? No? Have you heard anything about their interpreting before? Have you asked a deaf audience member if they would recommend that interpreter for that show? Not every actor fits every box. Not every interpreter fits every box. Not every deaf performer fits every box. In the same way, that not all of us are surgeons and some of us use Google effectively to solve medical problems.
And also, just to add as well, interpreters just wearing black only is a big no-no for me because it's a dark environment anyway, so I can't see, it's too dark, I feel disconnected. Make sure the clothing matches what's going on the stage as well. So for example, if it's kind of like a Victorian time, the interpreter should dress the same to feel integrated part of the show and not some separate entity. It's kind of like, the interpreter's there. If they're dressed just all in black, it's too formal, there's too much of a disconnect. So I like it when what they're wearing actually complements the show.
The other thing EJ and I talked about, and this also links into Derek's point earlier, was sometimes interpreted performances are used as a one-off. And that was kind of the same when Petre was in Jungle Book, it was a one-off, we'd use a deaf performer once. So anybody who's in the group gets to see goes, that's great! They tell everybody and nobody has the opportunity to come and see it. So I would say at minimum, if you're offering an interpretive performance, offer 2. Because then if it's good, people get to know about it and you'll start to build your deaf audience. If you're talking about getting people in, they need the opportunity to know, oh that was good, or that wasn't good, oh yeah, but the same way that as a hearing audience we hear from friends, oh that was a good performance, and we're looking, oh we're more data so that we can come and see it.
Also as well, in theatre as well, please be aware in regards to timing and things like that. Derek mentioned earlier, for example, things on a Wednesday afternoon or a Wednesday morning, it's the wrong time for people. Think about the timing of your schedules and things like that, Friday evening, Saturdays, weekends would be better. Think about people can actually come then. Also adequate publicity, making sure that gets out there, like it's been said earlier. Word of mouth is a great thing and things get recommended. But if it's just a one-off interpreted show, then our options are limited. As Amy said, I think that's it. There's loads and loads I could say, I could carry on and on and on, but I won't.
Maybe it's just worth saying we're around. I'll stick this up, so if you really want to jot down email addresses, they're there. But obviously EJ's company Turtlia is a tremendous force for creating not only BSL trailers, but engaging with the deaf community at large. And I know that she's currently trying to source, I hope this is not bad, so currently trying to source funding to set up a festival that will really exhibit deaf artists. So anybody can help with that. Literally please come and grab her because it will be amazing. You imagine what I just did there, that little tiny piece of signing, which was shockingly bad if you actually saw what the original was. Imagine if you had deaf artists, it's something that you're missing out on, you're missing a trick, and actually we need to separate. Jay, come back onto the stage. Jay, do you want to take a seat and start it? Yes.
You have a question right from the get-go. So do you want to come up?
Sorry, Barbara.
Just making sure everyone can see me. Yeah. Yeah, my name is Tasha. This is my sign name here. So, just to introduce myself, I'm part of a group. So it's a deaf creative group I'm a part of, which includes theatre, all elements of the creative industry. Interesting when you're talking about interpreted or translated theatre. That really interests me. My friend who works in theatre himself has asked for some assistance. They work as an interpreter, they were translating it. And for me, thinking about making sure it benefits the theatre, the interpreter, everyone involved, things like that. So it's, sometimes you can actually get deaf people to actually work with the interpreters beforehand to get the duality of the perspectives as you're getting ready for things. Deaf people have more natural facial expressions and things like that. How can I say this? Without being so formal. For example, a sign might need more expression or non-manual features, as they're called, in regards to the way that you express a sign to get the intent, the emotion, and things like that. So it's being aware of that, and it can be a challenge as well. And also, sometimes interpreters only get the script 2 weeks before a show, so that they're doing their best, and theatres don't pay extra time for preparation, and it is really hard work for interpreters and deaf translators. And, and thinking about, obviously interpreters have studied linguistics and things like that, and, I've got experience in terms of doing English translation, and the duality approach for us worked really well, and that's just something to consider, I think. Right. I agree with what you said. Maybe using like a BSL consultant. I've done this previously, things like that, in regards to where the interpreter's standing, to make sure there's a connection, discussing with the director, clothing, all these kind of elements to make sure it feels a part of the show. And also thinking from a deaf perspective as audience members. For example, it's kind of like looking at things that are happening, giving feedback beforehand, and also talking to the actors. Someone called Joe. I forgot his second name. I'm sorry, Joe. Someone.
Thank you, Clifford.
Joe Clifford. Thank you. She was really happy. We had interpreters, things like that. I said that's fine, which is great. It's a good example from her, having the interpreters more close to what's happening as opposed to being that feeling of disconnecting, being so far away from where the performance is. I would encourage you to kind of like play around with lighting as well and things like that, and think about the interpreter's process and make sure it's engaging for the audience members as well. Maybe using a deaf BSL consultant would be really important as well. So I agree with what that person's just said, with the previous comments.
Sure.
Can I should add with EJ, I know doing for the Tanya Allen. I had in my note early on that the poet training club, preparation time, that is crucial because a lot of interpreters do not get preparation club. They should get interpreting club for the day of the performance or night of the performance. They don't do it beforehand. They don't have post. They don't have before, after, and after. And the most important is deaf people getting paid. I have teams done deaf people doing it free of charge, supporting interpreters, and supporting the production without getting paid. We want to stop that habit. We want to make sure deaf people get paid. Supporting interpreters because it's important. You're right. it's important to interpret their together because the audience, the more that people come, the greater performance, the more performance will happen, the core preparation time and protein, and all to do the show beforehand. A lot of interpreters, when they get 1 week, I've seen some interpreters get maybe 4-5 day preparation before they actually then, but not in the show. So a lot of them panic.
I think there's quite an interesting theme around cost, isn't there? People will say to me in other parts of the work that we do, oh, we can't accommodate that because it's going to cost us more, whereas the benefit is that the cost delivers the value of an increased size of an audience or an increased, essentially, opportunities for artists who are deaf to take.
But if you get 50 deaf people, then you got an audience of, you got an audience of 10, average 10 in performance. Then we do well with preparation, editing, promotion, teamwork, interpreting, working together, and we get an extra 50 people, that money coming in, and that covering the cost to a different win.
Yeah, and that's a really strong partner.
And also as well, it's funny in regards to didn't I work at my company called Turtling? People ask me to do BSL promotional videos, which is great. I do the research and things like that. And sometimes people say, I've got no money, can you do voluntary? And I'm a bit like, I'm sorry, but I can't afford it either. I need to earn as well. I've got my own life as well. I've got my own bills to pay and rent, etc. I can't do voluntary work all the time. And I think you can't just be any deaf person and things like that. But also you just need to think about the budgets, the costs, things like that, and promotional and things like that. Kind of having this attitude to deaf people doing voluntary is unfair. We need to be on an equal par with everyone else and the same.
I think maybe going back to something that Anne said earlier about the aesthetic quality of BSL and actually thinking of it in creative terms. There's an undergraduate dissertation that was written by a lovely girl called Emily, whose last name I've forgotten, this was a long time ago since I read it, but she actually did research on hearing people's response to worship, like in religious settings where an interpreter was present, and the findings said that all the hearing audience felt that their ability to immerse themselves in worship was heightened because of the presence of a BSL interpreter. And so I think when we start thinking of BSL creatively, that's where you start, and the added value of it, that's where you start going, actually, there's added value, not just in the sales to deaf audiences, but wider. And sometimes, or a lot of the time, I hate the word accessible, because it just sounds, to me, accessible as a cheap box. I like the idea of a performance that's open. A performance that's open, you can show up any which time with whatever you need, and it's just there. And a performance that's open to everybody, and that should be enjoyed by everybody. The fact that there is somebody signing, or more than one person signing on a stage, reflects society.
I have a question for each of you, but I'd just like to make a couple of points first, if I could. First, about what Amy was just saying. There's actually quite a lot of neuroscience now that suggests that as audiences, we respond instinctively and much better to what we see visually than what we hear. There's actual, real science for putting visual languages on stage for audiences to respond to. Secondly, about the cost. Nobody ever says, shall we ask the lighting designer to do this for nothing? Nobody ever says, well, I quite like lights, but I'm not sure if it's going to be possible. If you want to include BSL, just do it. Include it in your whole list of things that you're going to have in your show, or wherever it is, and apportion your budget accordingly. Anyway, that's Roman Michael over with. Here's my question for EJ. We're talking about scavengers, and Andy was talking this morning about sort of creative impulses to do something very interesting on stage with languages. But my sense is that when when that happens, the result is quite complex on stage. That's no criticism at all. But I also remember having a conversation with you, EJ, when we did some research together about how it was quite important for a lot of deaf people that what's on stage is very simple and clear and easy to follow, because otherwise it's quite stressful to watch. And I wondered if you had any thoughts on how we can balance the ambition of theatre makers with the expectations of deaf audiences, which it seems to me can be quite different.
Could you just repeat that again, just so I'm not clear on the question? Sorry.
So, quite often what's on stage is very complicated in terms of who's using which language. It's difficult to follow for deaf audiences, and a lot of deaf audiences would like to see something that's much clearer and simple. How in the creative industries do we balance what theatre makers want to do with what audiences find easy to watch?
You can always use subtitles, that's one way. Also as well, I think, I can't, there's no perfect response for everything, you can't achieve everything, you can't expect it to be perfect all the way through and therefore fully accessible, it's impossible. For example, when hearing people go to audiences, they don't hear everything that's said on the stage, they don't understand everything that's said on the stage as well, and things like that. So you can't cover everything all the time. I think that's a response. Hello there. I'd just like to back up what EJ just said. I wasn't clear on the original question in regards to maybe a bit too jargon heavy. Maybe just explain it in a bit more clearer terms. What you mean by achieving a balance of performance and theatre? Could you just do that again? Could you sign it for me, maybe? You can. In terms of when you're creating theatre, you may have high ambitions, they may be very information heavy, things like that, a lot of language use. But a lot of deaf audiences may be put off by that, and it's trying to make things more visual, simple and straightforward to understand. So it's kind of achieving that with a creative balance of the artistic integrity in the aim. Right, okay, so so the question you can't answer yourself, right, okay, no worries. I was just wondering, I just wanted to make sure I was clear on the question initially, thank you.
One of my pet peeves is the idea of dumbing down language for a deaf audience. And that sometimes, and I'm sure that's not what you mean in your question, but that sometimes is how that question can read. And the reason for that is you think about the whole host, as Dave says, and AJ said, the whole host of performances that are put on. I can go and see Shakespeare, I can see that in modern speak or with the original text. And as a hearing participant, I can decide which one I go to. And what I don't like is when, as a hearing BSL knowledgeable person, I'll go and see the interpreter maybe dumb down Shakespeare to make it accessible for the deaf audience, and I go, well, actually that's not what this performance is about. So sometimes I think it's about choosing which performances you decide to interpret. But do absolutely offer them Shakespeare at high level, because that's how we appreciate language. We go to theatre to have language heightened, we go to have just have language and linguistic. And probably just means I'm a linguist, but all the linguistic nuances come alive and go, oh, that's amazing use of language. So that should be happening in BSL. Equally, some people hate going to see Shakespeare. They want to go see something where somebody's falling across the stage every 3 seconds and it's just very visual. That's okay as a choice too. But it's about then offering that variety out to a deaf audience, and maybe with them getting in to theatre because it's more visual, more like their own storytelling. Maybe that gets them interested in theatre in the same way that for me, I got interested in BSL from a Pink Gorilla. You know, it's getting it in and then look what you can do, because I think it is a crying shame to reduce BSL down to its component parts, because it is bloody fantastic. Like, I mean, just phenomenal. The depth that language can get to is nothing like English, because the way you can give me a soliloquy in English, and I'm like, yeah, you're struggling to create a visual image that I can create in my head in 3 seconds, but you just give me a paragraph. That's, you know, so it's about finding those texts and then allowing the time. So it comes back to that thing of allowing the time for a deaf performer or an interpreter or whoever you're using to be able to translate it. Because often what happens if you've got a script 2 weeks before and the language is up here, what you're seeing on stage is something called SSE mixed with a little bit of BSL. SSE is Sign Supported English. So the grammar isn't quite there. The deaf audience is going, what? Because it's half and half of both. But if they've had enough time to prepare, you'll get a full BSL translation that allows the deaf audience to get the visual image of what is being said, to hit that same emotional high, to see the intricacies of language produced visually on the fingers, in the body, in the shoulders, in the face, everything.
Right. For me, the movement situation, you cannot please everybody. You will not get 110 perfect to, there are some deaf people who are critical. I'll give you an example. I'm not a follower of Shakespeare. I've read Shakespeare. If I went to a Shakespeare show and I was in thick language, I may not understand it because I don't have the background in it. But at the same time, you have a new audience. You want to attract new people to come into these shows. So for example, there's a lot of shows are de-edited, and I would like, should I go here? But I know I'll see if I enjoy it or not. So most of them I have enjoyed it. Some of them I'm like, I'm dumb, I'm not clear. So we have to remember, not everybody can get the picture. There are some critics, but what's important is the great tip that EJ and Amy have done is plan early. Make sure you plan right. Talk to each other. Make adaptation, make amendment in the script, and also make sure you take everything before and maybe after maybe 4 or 5 critical friends, 4 or 5 critical friends who are there people to come along and watch it and get your feedback. The most important thing is trying to plan it with enough time to difficultly balance everybody, but what's important is being there with a language, being there with not a disability. I'm trying to make sure people do not do BSL as a disability. It's not about them, it's about the language. They want to access the language as BSL. That's important for accessibility, access to communication. Communication is access to everything. Easy engine capturing, that's important. Lip system, that's important. It's let an audience, a deaf audience come anytime you want, rather than you tell them, like, go 2 days, go 2 days, go 2 times. So with Michael calls the balance, and then more investigation, more either in that. So for London doing very well in theatre industry, you've got so many shows where it got been happening, but that's not the day it will happen. We've got all the people here doing with your support. Get more events happening with the people that can mainstream events and hopefully with their performance.
I feel that Dave has just done my closing remarks for me. And I think one of the things to know is that when you have a good note to finish on, you shut up and get off. So my apologies to Sally. I think there's an opportunity, I think, for people to talk to Sally about specifically some of the things, the brilliant things that the Science Centre has done in the hour we've got for lunch. And to end there, to leave the stage open to you upstairs to use this time to meet with one another and talk. Unless there's somebody else who would like the last word.
As a last word, I'd just like to promote Birds in Paradise show, My Left Right Foot, where they have fantastically integrated BSL. So please go and see it. That's Roxy during the festival, Roxy Assembly. And yeah, that's the last word for me.
Thank you to you, the audience. There will be some last words of conclusion on our website, so I've produced some of this information for you to have and take away. And thank you, all of the speakers and panelists here. Yeah, thank you. Particularly to our electronic note takers. My apologies for missing you off my list at the start. Our wonderful interpreters and all of the people, you know who you are, who've been involved in putting this fantastic event together. Teamwork. Thank you very much.
Upstairs.
First floor is where